Hi, I'm Maud Mosley. My pronouns are they, them, and this is The Other Team's Too Queer for a Career, a monthly series that dives into different aspects of the music industry with individuals who are passionately working in their respective areas. My guests today are from a label who strives to create an artist-friendly community that is fair to all the bands they work with and gives back to shared community. They also work to foster a safe space for POC and gay, trans, and questioning people. They believe everyone deserves a space where they can create and share and collaborate with others without fear of hate. Would you like to introduce yourselves, what you do, and kick us right off with why you are too queer for a career?
Okay, I'll go first. Hi, I'm Bird, they, them, and I am art and merchandise designer at knifepunch Records, as well as co-owner with Danny. And I'm too queer for a career because the scope of what art means to me in my life is so much bigger than its place under capitalism, and my belief that creativity is just as important as breathing, eating, and sleeping. So that's it.
Hi, I'm Maciej, also they, them, and I'm too queer for a career because I honestly just enjoy talking to people about music, and it's kind of a lot better than the traditional concepts of networking, and it just feels more interpersonal, I would say. That kind of like, I'm sorry, I'm completely at a loss for words here. It just feels more honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for both of you sharing that. I really am so excited to dive into, both aspects of what you two just focused on. But, first and foremost, I know you're both here from knifepunch Records. Can you share a little bit more about the group's history and kind of a little bit about how it came to exist?
Okay, so our founder, Danny, is not on the call today because so Danny actually founded knifepunch with Kevin. Danny had went to Snip Fest that Guilt organized. So Guilt puts on a yearly trans fundraiser show called Snip Fest. And Danny was just so moved by attending it that she started the label and got the whole thing going because there was a void of this stuff in Florida, and the scene was very cis male focused, and we needed to be there. So it was just Danny for a while, and then I came on because I was a member of the community and I just saw people needed help, and I always loved to help. And it got to a point where I would like to take on a larger role. So I handle all the creative side of things and sometimes our artist relations stuff, and just anything that Danny wants me to handle, I handle.
Yeah.
It's a very equally run organization where we all discuss what we think what we want to see, what we want to do together. We get to do. And Maciej is one of our very active community members that also stepped in to help out when we need an extra hand.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm actually the weird one here because the last time I've been to Florida was just about 10 years ago. And then way, way before I started my journey with any sort of DIY music or any really music whatsoever. But
I went to Florida in October for Fest, so we're both not in Florida talking about our Florida label.
To describe my first experience with knifepunch is actually also related to Guilt, because actually they were one of the first tapes I ordered once I kind of started getting more into tapes, and then kind of, eventually became friends with Danny and kind of just joined on to do PR / literally just talking to people stuff.
I love ideas. That. And so, Bird, I know you shared a little bit about what had you interested in this work. But Maciej, could you share a little bit more about kind of what brought you into it and what got you involved?
Yeah, sure. So also my name's Maciej.
Oh, apologies.
No worries. But basically I went to a I went to Philly for college, and there I kind of slowly fell into the vast DIY scene just because at the time I went to college, I was already interested in music, although very much less emo DIY stuff, as more so just pop punk. And then slowly fell into it because a lot of my friends were involved in the music scene. And one of my friends, John from Fire Hazard Records, was the kind of first person I've seen really running a full-on DIY record label. And that's what really got me inspired to kind of work more with DIY music. I guess it's worth mentioning I also booked shows for a little bit in 2019, 2020, where my friend James and I ran a house called Wharf Art Center. And we just had a bunch of bands on there. And that's what really got me just loving the world of music and how many cool people there are.
That's really exciting. And it's really great to just see the passion in the work, that brought both of you to this work, and also just like continues to push you in this work. So, when you have to think about what you do at Knife Punch, even maybe outside of Knife Punch as it relates, what are like the main things that you love about this work?
I guess I can take that one first. It's like I mentioned before, I'm not really super into the idea of networking as it's just talking to people, except with the intention of not as much making friends as using them for something. Mm-hmm. And I kind of like to take the reverse approach of that, where, the main point is not making connections as much as kind of just finding a common ground with people and becoming friends with them, like just having this extended network of friends, and not so much acquaintances.
Yeah.
And really sharing the really cool music comes out of different scenes, just because, each scene has their own hidden gems. And it's really cool seeing what different people really like.
Yeah. And thank you so much for really bringing focus on that. I feel like that creates, that sense of networking creates such a disconnect in community, especially in the art scene, because it can, give this atmosphere in so many spaces that everyone's just in that space to kind of get ahead of somebody else or use someone else, kind of bring in that bigger industry.
Everyone's there for their own gain, not as much, appreciating the people there as they are there to appreciate themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that type of authenticity of how we don't do the networking thing, we do the making friends with everybody thing, really, really works for us and is kind of our whole brand of just an open community where you can hang out with us. And Danny does the Twitch streams and we have our Discord server, and it's just, we're not networking. You can come and be friends with us and be part of it. And that's really fun part of Knife Punch. Also, for me personally, my place in things, sometimes I consider myself a little bit of a stagehand, metaphorically, because we have a lot of people who are the bands, who are the face of the music that they're making. And what I do is kind of a secondary role where I create art or layouts or whatever thing that they need, their merchandise, things like that, which isn't usually the thing people are paying attention to who's doing in the scene. So for me, it's working with somebody to make them feel like someone understands their art and their vision, to really feel like they feel seen and they feel connected with and they feel listened to, and that I can create something that is an extension of the thing that they've been doing. And that is really, really, really satisfying to me.
Yeah.
To expand on that, it's like just helping them flourish.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of, taking what they have, or I'm just restating what you said, I realize now, but taking what they have already and kind of building on top of it.
DIY labels,
making sure they feel appreciated.
Yeah. DIY labels get a little bit of a bad rep for being like the stepping stone, like the very bottom of the music industry ladder or whatever you want to look at it. But I think that place is also really important, because if you are going to be somebody's first step up into something, then you should hold their hand really firmly and you should make that step up really nice. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being in that place in the community at all.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you bring up a really fantastic point, regarding if you're going to be an entrance for people, then that entrance should be the most positive experience, because it should set people up to say, this is the way you deserve to be treated. This is how a label should treat you. This is what you deserve. You should get that level of respect and have people really take you through these things and want the best for you. So having that, be people's introduction to working with a label is not only a positive experience for them as they work with you, but they can really take that learning when they maybe work with other people in the future, and they can really assess those situations to be, stand firmer to say, I actually don't want to be treated like this here because I wasn't treated like that before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So, with all the things you love about what you do, has there been anything that's really stood out as a highlight, in your time at Knife Punch?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy most of it. Like, I feel like all of it, all the things that we execute really successfully, like when we pull something off, because we have these schemes where we always dream bigger than we think we can actually pull off. And it's just amazing that just a small handful of people can really do these things sometimes. So when we are able to do something, it's just such like a rewarding experience. It just feels amazing. And for me, creating the art for things, with each artist having that connection of them being like, this is how I want people to see me. This is how the headspace I was in when I was writing these songs. Like, this is the mood I want to elicit. Like, these colors are important to me, something like that. Like, I just feel great, like pulling something off and then being like, you get it. Like, this is amazing. This is just what I wanted. Or like, just to be proud of something together.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's most really the biggest highlight is just seeing people grow. Like, for example, thinking about how much Guild has changed in the past 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
I think. Yeah, 2 years since I got Ignore Was Missing on tape. And then like the whole transformation they went through and just seeing them, actually getting big is really cool. And it's just really awesome seeing that whole process happen.
Yeah, they signed to a bigger label, but we're still friends and we still work together and we still do releases and stuff with them. And it's just like, we still have this really strong connection because we all started together. Sorry.
Yeah, definitely. And, as you've highlighted throughout this too, like those connections have always been about more than just the work that you're doing with one another. They're truly about, that support that you can give to one another. So that's really incredible to see that, as things grow and work changes, that community can still be there. And speaking of, that growth and change, I know neither of you are, the quote unquote founder, but what do you find has changed since the beginning of Knife Punch? What have those changes looked like?
So one of the things that I came on board to do is help Danny manage trying to do literally everything themselves. And just being like the person who puts things on a bit more of a schedule and reins things down to earth. So when I see that the plate is too full, I'm like, how much of this can you actually do? Or is this a good idea for us? So I kind of have to, unfortunately, be that voice of like, can we really spend this money? Could we really do this? So I think the changes have been making better decisions together. I think that's a good thing. I think we're doing a lot more things as pre-orders now. And yeah, we really are trying to help as many people as we can, but we have to keep the roster a little bit small just to keep it realistic, just to keep like the amount that we're able to provide for people. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin. So being a little bit realistic and being a little bit of the Capricorn.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's good having that it's good having that voice of reason, because it's easy to just throw out just out of this world ideas that have no chance of getting made, but taking that original idea and kind of working it down, chipping away at it until you have something that you can actually do and, really put your strengths to.
Yeah, definitely. I know sometimes when you can look at things and say, oh, I really want to do this, it can be so hard to think about really what's achievable in the present. And, especially looking at those changes, like keeping a smaller roster, I feel like, there's challenges that come along with that when you're so invested in your community and you want to support as many people as possible. And yet you have to balance with this idea of what's realistic, and what happens when you expand your roster too much and all of a sudden, are really stretching your resources and people aren't getting as much of that support and connection because you're kind of overwhelmed. Do you feel like those decisions and that balance, are hard to make or hard to find? Or do you feel like it's something that's kind of getting easier as it goes?
Oh, for sure, definitely getting easier. I think, like, at least for me, I had the hardest time saying no to people, especially before I joined Knife Punch. And it's kind of the sort of thing where I'm still having a lot of issues saying no to people just because, I want to help everybody. And it's hard to manage that against just not having the resources to do so necessarily.
I think we had a lot of growing pains maybe when like things picked up for us and people noticed us and we got more followers and stuff like that. And Danny wanted to grow the ideas bigger and us being like, we still have the same amount of resources and the same amount of people. Like we can't just do every single thing, like Maciej said, and we have to say no sometimes. But working together more and more, we kind of understand each other's rhythms in terms of like who needs to take on more at what point and who needs to step back and rest. And we have an extremely important emphasis on trying to make sure nobody gets burnt out and making time for rest.
I love that rest is such a priority in the way where it's something that's actually spoken about and kind of scheduled and being seen as making sure people actually have the time for that. And, you do mention these growing pains that changes have come with kind of this increased audience. What else has growth looked like for Knife Punch?
So I think for me, at least, the biggest growth that I've seen with Knife Punch is just kind of building more of those resources. Like I came on originally to help Danny with just social media stuff, getting more people interested and kind of getting more resources to getting more things that we can actually, getting more people we can work with. So like, that's kind of making those connections. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, getting more of our bands like written about, talked about, shared. We want them to have reviews. We want them on playlists, stuff like that. And we have some pretty big reviewers who pay attention to what we put out and stuff. And
yeah, exactly. And it's like making those sorts of friends where one with reviewers, I can always just send them music from my friends, even if it's not explicitly asking for a review. It's kind of just like, hey, I think you'd like this kind of thing. And then, if we do need something written about, it's easy to just hit them up and ask for it.
Oh, and bringing it back to kind of what we do also, at the core of everything we're doing and everyone that we help out and believe in, like everyone that is on our roster, everyone that's in our community, like we try to only do things that we're really excited about. So we can put that heart and effort into it and put that kind of love and special attention and friendship and all the good stuff that's not just like doing a job and networking. Or
yeah, I would say
clout chasing, whatever people are saying. But like we really truly believe like the stuff we're putting out, like these are our friends, like they're doing great stuff. I want people to listen to it because I love it. Like I love making the merch because it's great. Like it's not just like a transactional thing whatsoever.
Yeah, I think going back to the highlights question, honestly, one of the best feelings I've had is knowing someone and then having either their unreleased music or already released music and just being able to text them and be like, hey, I really love this song. Like,
Yeah.
it just means so much to me. Like, it's really good. I just want to listen to more of your music. I want to support you in any way possible, you know?
Yeah, I love that so much. I can definitely relate. And, with this idea of growth that you've mentioned, that's so largely rooted in just caring, and, having that care be there. What does success mean to you, either you personally in your specific kind of area of work or success for Knife Punch as a whole?
I think success for Knife Punch is like, we do want all our friends, our artists, our releases we put out, everything. We do want them to get the appropriate attention for how much blood, sweat, tears, love, everything that they pour into what they're creating and what we're making together. We want that to we want people to look at it, listen to it all, and feel it. Like, success would be like the proper weight of it all being understood. And I don't think that's a numbers game. I think it's just more of a getting people to talk about stuff, getting people to feel the feelings. That's very, very impossible to quantify. But even some stuff where we don't sell a lot of tapes and we end up having to put some of the tapes on sale or something like that, there's still people who will come back and talk about like, hey, that one was like really, really touching to me. Like, I still think about this or something like that. Like, that to me is more important.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned that kind of feels like success to Knife Punch. Is that also what success means to you, or do you also have your own individual ideas as well?
Yeah, I think that's a personally biased answer. I'm sure Danny does want everything to sell out and does want all our artists to be on these playlists and have great reviews and do all of that stuff too. I think all of it is the bigger picture of a successful thing.
I think to touch on the bigger impact of these things, kind of, at least for me, like the biggest measure of success is just building that community, like going even outside of Knife Punch. When I played in a band in 2019, 2020, I remember there was one specific show where we went on tour to so we were originally based in half the band was in Claymont, I was in Philly. And then we went on tour to Fitchburg, which is like 2 hours away from Boston. And the show there was really good. I remember just having a really fun time. And then we stayed for a couple of hours afterwards, just kind of hanging out, smoking with the people there. And I have like a very specific memory of leaving that house and seeing, I want to say, the bassist for one of the other bands just waving goodbye at me and having this realization that, wow, this sort of community built of people around music is very close to what we have in Philly. And it's nice that I was able to experience it for at least the one night.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I really just love talking to people about what success means to them, because I think, as both of you mentioned in your introductions, the things that make you too queer for a career per se are about really separating yourself from, capitalist notions of success to just be involved and passionate about the work that you're doing. And I feel like that's really communicated through what you also see as a success for Knife Punch, as well as your work at Knife Punch. And, talking through the history and the development of Knife Punch and your work there, what have you been up to lately? What do you feel like your focus really is right now and for the near future?
Lately, I feel like I get a lot of the stuff early on that I have to keep secrets. So I'll be working on things and then we'll plan out our calendar of like, when are we going to announce this? When is this going to actually come out? So I'm always operating a little bit in the future. And my focus right now is doing a lot of merchandise layout, stuff like that. And we'll get some announcements soon. We have the new Gutless stuff coming out, but I'm not doing the art on that, but I will be doing some art for some really, really exciting tapes that I'm looking forward to.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm more so focused on the present as much as, once we have actual music and we can talk about it, it's kind of getting, that publicity for it. And like the last thing we did was Gamma Girl and Cult of Flesh and Blood. That was just really cool seeing the community come together and seeing people enjoy these songs that I've been listening to for a while, and being able to actually talk to people about that music. And then like Bird mentioned with Gutless, is the same thing where now that we're slowly getting into the swing of things, it's really cool interacting with just V and the rest of the band and being able to talk to them about the plans that we have for future releases, as well as just like then getting the entire community to listen to them. And actually, a really funny story about this new single coming out, Burning the Bridge, is that so about 2-3 months ago, I started reading Tranny by Laura Jane Grace and just kind of finally got into Against Me because they never really clicked for me.
Against Me is my heart.
Oh, I got so into them. For the first like week I was reading the book, I got super into I Still Love You, Julie, and I just loved that song so much. And then slowly as the book went on, I got into the other albums and really felt like I went on this whole journey with the band. But to tie it back to Gutless, it was really interesting listening back to Burning the Bridge after a little bit and having that context of Against Me, because they sound so much alike. I was like, it's so awesome to me being able to know someone who makes that sort of music and who reminds me so much of the band that kind of really means a lot to me now.
Yeah, I love that.
I've been working a lot with Guilt about their current release cycle right now for Conceit. And even though they're not on our label anymore, like I said, we still have a very strong relationship. We're friends, and I do all their artwork stuff. And yeah, it was hard to keep a secret for a long time because I started working on photography for the EP cover back in end of December, early January. Like I actually shot the photo in January and then was doing editing and then was doing illustration and doing all of the stuff that's going to be in the vinyl that's not even on the website yet. Like the whole, like the illustrations, the layout, everything I'm just thrilled about. And yeah, Tyler and I just really connected over like understanding each other through art. And where is it going? Sorry, I kind of blank out when I talk. Just cut that. Yeah, Tyler and I really connected over understanding each other through each other's art and what it felt like to get to work with people who in DIY who do things very professionally and who feel passionately about stuff. Because even though, like I said, like we're at that like entry level kind of stepping stone for things, like there's such amazing music and art coming out of here. And when I say like my friends are some of my favorite bands, they think I'm just hyping them up, but I'm not gassing them up. I like legit mean it. Like Guilt really is in my top 5, like, or top 3 or something like that. And they always forget that. And when they see me write about like, these are my favorite bands, and they're like, oh, you actually have us in there. And I'm like, yeah, like 1,000%, like all our friends and the people we work with, like we really do feel like they're as good as any of these like famous bands. Like,
yeah, I think
the level of stuff being put out in DIY right now, like it's awesome. It's thrilling.
Yeah, I think coming at this from a fan perspective as well, where like I didn't know Guild until I started working with Knife Punch, and like my first introduction to guilt was Ignore What's Missing, and then eventually I met Tyler, and it's like really cool. I don't remember where I was going with this, but sorry, I just saw Bird laughing and I was like, yeah, I'm cracking. But having access to those releases early is really cool, just from a fan perspective, and being able to listen to this stuff for like 2-3 months in advance. Like, this is not necessarily Knife Punch related, but my friend's band Rigby Picnic just released an album like 2 weeks ago. And I remember very specifically getting the SoundCloud link for that in like January or February, because they were looking for some media stuff as well. And just falling in love with the album, having some of the songs on repeat all day. And the same thing's happening right now with Saturn, where it's like, even though it's harder to listen to per se, just because, you know, it's less convenient, it's like seeing myself go to these sorts of lengths to listen to that music is really cool. And knowing that in some way I know and have access to the people who make this music is really cool, just for the fact that, you know, either I can just gush to them about how much it rocks, or even like reach out and ask for chords so I can play the songs myself.
Yeah, it is so cool to have those connections. And I feel like both of you really touch on this like sad reality, honestly, where people kind of think like, if you're not a popular band or like a famous artist, then that means you're not like good enough to be one. Or like you are just not at that same level, which is such a myth, you know, as you mentioned, like the, you know, music and the quality of music that DIY is currently putting out, that musicians at all levels currently are putting out and have been putting out in the past, is just incredible. And I always see, you know, something I see people, especially in the DIY scene, speak to is, you know, when you see headliners at a festival, or when you do see those popular artists, it's not like they've been famous their entire career. Like, they all came from somewhere, they all built that up. So it's like the people that you're seeing and supporting now, you know, down the line could be those ones that you're now like seeing headlining, that you are seeing as those famous artists, if that's who they want to be. And, you know, it just means through that support and through that community and through that love, like, it's not just about, you know, being famous at all times and like getting recognized, or however lots of people kind of are led to believe the music industry works.
As much as I would like really, really love to see that for some of our bands, and how some of them like do want that and others don't, and they really just want to have a tape out and have some friends share it.
Yeah.
And there's so much of like, I don't like the term like elder emo or something like that. I consider myself a scene lifer because I've been at this a redacted amount of time. But I feel like when I was a teenager and I was discovering a lot of bands through like forums or MySpace or other parts of the web, and you could just message a band and they would send you a CD or their demo or something like that. Like, it's kind of that same level of like, I still remember so many of those. I still remember how nice some of those people were to me, and how like the demos that they sent me like still resonate with me. And I don't know a single person in my life who's ever heard of some of these bands, but the fact that like it still sits somewhere in my heart, the same place as like a Thursday album or like something like that. Like, the goal, I guess the goal is just making something that means something to somebody.
Yeah. I think of some of my favorite albums and EPs that are like things that I came across where it's like the band came together, they had fun, they made this, you know, album or EP that they loved, and then they all were just like, all right, bye, and like left. And I'm always like, there's always that part of you as like a fan who like comes across their music and falls in love with it, being like, oh, I wish I had more to listen to. But then at the end of the day, you're like, oh, I'm just glad that you created something where you were having a good time and that's what you wanted to do. Like,
Oh my God! Since you mentioned that, there's one band that sits really close to my heart that was active for my freshman year in Philly called Sandboxing that released like a free song EP and then played a few shows and stopped being a band is because you know stuff happened, whatever. But like those that year that they were active was I have some of the best memories from there. Just being at their shows, singing along the words, and having that experience is really cool. And then actually, a couple of years later, since this would have been 2017 that they released their EP, and 3 years later, Fire Hazard Records released their discography or discography tapes, which included that EP plus 5 more songs that they recorded at some point and like demoed out and then had laying around. And it was just like such a good memory of that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love when things can just reconnect us with like a particular month or a particular year, and you can just kind of like sit in that and like have nostalgia for even like a year ago or like a couple months ago, but have that just like same kind of overwhelming feeling. Absolutely.
God, yeah, like having those ties where like a specific song, like just as an example, Origami Angels, Find Your Throne. I can place the exact street in Philly that I was walking down on with my bass, listening to it and like feeling on top of the world.
Oh, that's yes. Live for moments like those. But yeah, I really also want to connect back to, these ideas that we've been talking about, regarding this work under capitalism and outside of capitalism, but also recognizing that unfortunately, in the current state of the world, really nothing can be outside of capitalism. So, we discussed, how you really assess for like burnout and taking care of each other. But what does finding stability, and however you want to define stability, in your work look like?
I think for all of us in Knife Punch, this is what we do in the time between doing day jobs. And this is us creating a space in what we wish our lives looked like. And like I said, like you just said about you can't really do anything outside of capitalism. It's ever present, it's ever crushing. Can together create a space outside of that, although not really truly outside of that, but that feels in every possible way different because we're doing it differently, because we're looking after each other. So yeah, all of us do have our day jobs, all of us do have a separate life and maybe a separate personality, but of just kind of splitting it up into making that work, and in the crumbs and the nooks and the spaces that we can, to create our own little DIY utopia as best we can.
I would say it's also going sort of away from the planning where, not having a well-defined path and just being like, you need to do this, this, and that to progress. And instead just having the wildest ideas we can come up with and working away at them until we can actually do them, and really making this work as an extension of our personalities rather than the regular way of making things work, which is just, burying yourself into the work, really going down a well-defined path, building, going down a career path that's essentially the same for everyone.
Yeah. And so with those, ideas of career paths and maybe what the future looks like and stability, do you feel like the idea of stability connects to, being able to leave day jobs and really focus on Knife Punch? Or do you believe stability is found in being able to do multiple kinds of work at the same time?
I think the reality of a DIY label is that we are at this level, and I think we're going to stay at this level. I don't think we're ever going to grow into like a business with employees and things. So I don't think that growth is ever going to be a thing that can sustain us. I think we sort of accept that and we do what we do as a continuation of community. I feel like labels come and go and it's a baton pass to keep the scene alive. But the ones that have a couple people who work together well last a lot longer. So I think there's always a sense of finding stability in other ways and finding the balance in letting this be a thing that stays happy. And if it's not my day job, and if it's not the thing I pour everything into, and if it's not the source of my income and whether I can eat or something like that, then it's not something that's making me miserable. I think as soon as art became my job, I lost a lot of the magic of it, and it took a lot of healing to feel it again. And it took a lot of figuring out how to be excited about my projects and how to not feel like I'm being squeezed out. But yeah, I think having some separation in your life and choosing to do things that you feel passionate about and feel strongly about, and working with people that you are genuinely excited about, and that it's not a clout chase, I think that is the emotional stability of it. And that it still feels good. And as soon as it's not feeling good, you got to take a break.
Yeah, I love this idea of finding stability and like joy rather than in like, paying the bills, because paying the bills is obviously
I don't know. I don't have an
like,
answer for that one.
like that's obviously really important, but also like stability can be more than financial.
I can't speak to financial stability.
I would
I can
say
speak to credit card debt.
I would say on the kind of flip side of, finding financial stability, it's something I've thought about a lot because I originally went to school for computer science, and that's just a totally different thing compared to music, like money wise. And I think at one point last year, I ended up trying to go to school for music for a little bit and trying to make that my career. But in the end, decided that it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to be invested into full time, just because, I, like Bird mentioned, I don't really see that sort of stability for just doing art full time and making that be the thing that pays the bills. And I think it's much easier to have a full-time career that pays the bills, as well as, if possible, gives you more money to put into music so that you can better support it. Where like I totally lost my
There's
train of
not a
thought
lot
there.
There's not a lot of money in arts. So trying to pursue it as a full-time thing leads a lot of people to, and sometimes just having a different, not better paying career gives you more access to the resources to make art that you need to do.
Yeah, that is such a reality. That is not the most positive not positive at all for a lot of people, not the most positive for some situations.
I'm trying to do a positive spin on it.
Yeah, it's like a
we just have to do the best we can do, because there's so much we can't change. And like I said, we can only affect like our small corner of it and try to make it our best little corner. But the grander scheme is how much we can't control. And that falls into that.
In my opinion, there's also something to be said for like having that outside reach where, music isn't the only thing you do, or art isn't the only thing you do. And kind of you have that sphere of influences where you can really bring in outside ideas or bring in outside concepts and work away at it to make things better for yourself in the little of the DIY scene.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know this has been a large focus on, the financial limitations that there are, and limitations for being a DIY label that's not going to like grow into, the next big industry label. But, outside of that, or even inside of that, if there's anything you want to dive into deeper, what are other barriers that you're met with in this work, and how do you face them, overcome them? Or I feel like, approach them with the kind of acceptance that you have with understanding, financial situations in terms of Knife Punch.
So as you can see, the three of us are kind of idealists. I mean, Danny included. All of Knife Punch, we are these positive friendshipy people, but not everyone is. And a lot of the barriers that we come up to is dealing with some attitudes and some people that don't jive with the way we do things. And sometimes we get ripped off, or sometimes we still get shut out of stuff, or there's still some gatekeeping that happens, or all kinds of stuff like that. So I think not everyone being the same as us. And sometimes it's your own community and you really want people that share your identities to support each other. And then you're just really, really, really disappointed when it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
So
that can honestly be heartbreaking.
Yeah,
when that happens.
Just about to say, like, there's a bit of like navigating a little bit of heartbreak when people don't work together. Like,
yeah,
do it yourself doesn't mean just yourself. It should be together, but some people do really treat it as like a little crab bucket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's my least favorite part. That's the worst part to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned Laura Jane Grace earlier, and Laura Jane Grace, I recall her saying, "Do it yourself" never meant do it alone. And I think about that all the time.
Yeah, I think there's also a little bit to be said for like this sort of extreme idealists, like tying it back to Laura Jane Grace. Like, I don't know if you read Trenny, but the way they treated her after she signed to a major label and kind of, did the thing that was best for her life at the time. It was really where it's really just heartbreaking seeing that these fans didn't necessarily want what's best for the people as much as just what's best for their ideals. Where, given that this reality we live in, it's sometimes hard to escape it's hard to escape the fact that there's bills to pay, and like at the end of the day you do need to be making money. And I don't know, sometimes it's not as much of an obstacle as like just it's a hard space to navigate between being true to what you believe in and making those little compromises that you at the end of the day have to make.
Yeah, I feel like there's some really complicated and like twisting truths there that collide a lot, especially in these communities where it's, we want to operate, we want to function, we want to put out art in this way, but also some of us, and sometimes a lot of us, want to also make money and sometimes get big or do this in like a more financially stable way. And absolutely, sometimes both those sides of things can clash or can butt heads, or people can say, you're doing this the wrong way. Or, you're, as there's a fantastic book that was held up on the call, so I can mention it now, but Sellout by Dan Ozzie does a really great job of going into these complex truths and really how they've affected artists in the past, and if they still kind of, how that narrative still exists and impacts people now.
Oh yeah, I have yet to read that book, but it's been on my list for so long because I think Dan Ozzie co-wrote Tranny. I don't know. Like his name is on the side of my book, so like I assumed he helped in a substantial way. But it's just the fact that I haven't been able to get Sellout anywhere in Poland, and just kind of waiting on my chance to finally read it.
We'll find it when you come back to Philly.
Absolutely. I feel like if you like this podcast episode, mail a copy. But yeah, with that, we're coming to the end here. We've talked just a lot about what we love, but also these barriers that we face and what work looks like today, and how all of these things line up and don't line up. So, what would you share with others who are looking to get into this work?
I would say just do what you enjoy. Like for the longest time throughout my regular life, my high school, my college life, I had so much trouble finding motivation. And eventually it rested on, this is something I believe in. This doesn't actually require me to be motivated as much as I will just do it because I want to do it. And kind of go along with your gut instinct that like, if something feels right, it's probably right.
Yeah, I would agree with examine your motivations a little bit. Like, why do you want to do the things you want to do? Like, how does it feel? Sometimes attention is a perfectly good reason to do some things. Sometimes you care about something a lot. Sometimes the numbers are important to you for some reason. Sure. But yeah, just have those conversations with yourself of like, what are my motivations? What are my goals? Am I going to feel okay if I don't reach my goals? Yeah, I mean, I fell back into DIY so completely accidentally that I don't know. It's just like I followed a different dream. I went into the fashion industry, and I think I had a pretty decent career going on there. And then pandemic lockdown, and a lot of companies shut down entire departments, and a lot of people lost their jobs. And I had to kind of cope with like, hey, I followed my dream and I did pretty well. And it's kind of at a stalling point right now. And I'm going to do a different dream of mine for the time being until I figure out the next thing. And there's no real rule that whatever thing you do has to be your life forever. So if you get into something and you make one album or one EP or some cool stuff, put on some cool shows with your friends, and don't feel like it has to be the rest of your life. You can have a really, really great time, and it can be a success in the way that the time that you put into it was meaningful. Yeah. And then follow as many dreams as you want. Like have sections of your life where you just do whatever you feel like a magnetic pull to.
Yeah, I wish I could credit who I recently saw this from, but I recently saw something speaking to that where it was sharing, often we think if something ends, it was a failure. Something is only a success if it lasts forever. We see like a marriage that ends is a failed marriage, even if it was like came to a natural conclusion and both people are, happy to move on to other things. If you don't do a career your whole life, you failed out of like that career, you failed out of that work and are doing something else, even though you can just be like happily moving on to a different like set of things and practices. So yeah, I think that's so important to recognize in all the work we do, regardless of what that work may be. And on the flip side, as what you have described as like this entrance level work, an organization to be working with, what advice do you have like for artists who are unsure about working with a label at any level?
So one of the ways that DIY tape labels are kind of looked down upon is that some people think they're unnecessary because a lot of people can self-release their music and they can put out their own merchandise and run their own Bandcamp shop, and they can do a lot of what we do by themselves. But I think the reason the labels exist is you shouldn't have to do this by yourself. Like we can handle distro, we can do a lot of stuff. We can just help you out. Like you could just hang out in the chat and be like, hey, how do I do this? And someone will answer you, and someone will give you perspective on like, hey, does this J card layout look okay? So yeah, I think somebody getting into it at that level and wanting to be with a label, like, yeah, you can do all of it yourself, but you're going to be really tired and stressed out and spread thin if that's not your energy level. And you can have cool friends that help you do it. That's basically it. Like we're pretty approachable in our community, and if we can't put somebody on the label, we'll still try to help them out and either point them to we have a lot of other tape labels that we talk with, and we have other group chats with them, we can point them to one of our friends, or we can put them on some of our Twitch streams, or just try to do something, or just try to get people connected within the community. So even if we can't always help directly, like there's always that, just come and talk to us.
Yeah, I think you touched on there on like having that network of resources, and like the truth is that we've all failed a lot at one point and gained, experience from that, and have like ways that we know we can work around. And if you're doing it all yourself, it's a lot harder because not all of your plans are going to come fully realized.
Yeah.
So having a reach of people around you to do all the work that you don't want to do, or all the work that's boring. Like, I don't know, I wanted to start a tape label for a little bit. I did a few tapes, and then I realized that I don't really enjoy dubbing tapes as much as I enjoy talking about music.
Mhm.
Oh, I don't want to dub tapes. I'm so glad Danny dubs the tapes.
Oh yeah, I like have the hardest time just motivating myself to do it and then listening back to all of them, even though like I love the music, I'll vibe to the music, but it's just too much work, like something that I want to touch on. And it's like the kind of thing that I've had to fail at to realize that, hey, this is not necessarily my domain. And if you're an artist looking to release an album you really believe in, I personally wouldn't think it's worth letting yourself fail on that to, or restricting yourself. Like, I don't know, I used to really believe into doing everything myself up to a point where I just realized, this is not a good way of doing it, because I'm not a good visual artist. Like, if I wanted to make a cover that really got a vibe across, it would take me a long time to figure out how to do it, for example.
Yeah, I hear that. And with that in mind, where can people find you and get involved in your work?
So we're on Twitter, knifepunch Rex. We're on Instagram as well. But I always recommend people join our Discord server, and there's a link for that on our website. Because that's really where things happen. That's where people connect. That's where people start finding collaborators and getting to know us. And I personally really don't like the cold email. And I know a lot of people try to reach out in cold email labels, and that's sort of accepted. But I think if you find a label that you feel like would be a good home for you and would be a good fit for you, you should just actually be involved in whatever their community is and interact with them and try to make your name and face familiar to them. And then it feels like there's a natural reason to work together.
Yeah, I think even if cold emails work, it's also the kind of thing where I don't necessarily check my email a lot. And
none of us do. we check it every once in a while.
It's a lot easier for me to, if I know someone, I don't know, this feels terrible to say, but like it becomes a lot easier to listen to the things they send me, or not necessarily give them advice, because obviously I'm going to be open to everyone, but it just knowing them already gives that little bit of an advantage, I would say. And like, if you do work with a label and like talk to them, you'll eventually get a good feeling of the vibe, and you'll both get a good sort of idea of if this is a good fit for the label. They'll have an idea of your personality. So even if, it's not necessarily the best fit, we can always recommend someone who is a better fit, or like would have a just a better impact. And actually, I don't know if we have the time for a story, but one of the bands that knifepunch released tapes for, Goalie Lagging, is I was really happy with, because
I did some shirts for them recently.
Oh, those shirts look awesome. I'm hopefully gonna get one soon. But no, yeah. What was I saying? That like I was friends with their bassist Amani since their old band. We played a few shows together. They played at my house. And like once this EP came out, I listened to it and I was like, oh, Danny would love this. And like she absolutely did. And it was really cool seeing that connection happen. And also us eventually make tapes for them and like really seeing the band kind of build up.
Yeah, it's so exciting how, these connections and these communities, we always talk about like instead of, reaching up and trying to pull yourself up, like lift each other up, work with one another and like rise together, I guess is kind of the cliche way of saying it, but it's so real. It's so important. And I absolutely understand that and really, really appreciate both of you for speaking to that. And, thank you for joining me on, Too Queer for a Career. To end it, I always love hearing a story about, a time that you either realized that, you were too queer for a career, maybe a funny previous work story of a field you used to work in and decided you needed to leave, or if there's something that, brought you to where you are today, that you would like to share.
Okay. I don't want to talk about like my past bad job experiences. I have so many bad stories of trying to do industry work and just dealing with the most nightmarish people ever, that I just want to tell a good and funny story about what actually got me into Knife Punch.
Yes. I love ending on positivity as well. Go
Yeah.
for it.
I moved back to Philadelphia after things shut down in New York and I didn't have my job and everything. I just came back and I felt completely isolated. Like I was further apart from all my friends. I just felt disconnected in the way that everybody else was already disconnected, but a city move on top of that. And yeah, I was going online and finding music to listen to. And it was also Guilt, Ignore What's Missing, that just hit me so personally. I was like, this is written for me. This is for me specifically. And I found everyone online. I started following people. I joined the community. And there was one point where the way Danny tries to push stuff on socials is so funny. And Danny was just like, everyone has to buy this Guilt album because they're hungry and they're going to eat coffee beans for dinner. And posted a screen cap. I think it was with like Tyler. Somebody in the band was saying that they were out of food and they needed to sell the tapes so they could eat more than coffee beans. So I responded to the tweet and I wrote like, I'll mail you a potato. and they were like, if you're for real, I'm for real. And immediately DM'd me like, here's my address. And then I'm like, wait, if I actually mail a potato, it's going to show up disgusting. So I made, I think Instacart or one of those apps, I made an account for the express purpose of finding some local Florida potatoes to send to this band. And there's a minimum, so it couldn't just be one potato. So I sent 4 potatoes, a pumpkin pie, and 4 chocolate pumpkin candies. And I said, please give one to each member of the band. And yeah, that's how we started talking. And at the point, Nico was still the bassist in the band. They're not anymore, but they're solo artist, Community Tal, who's amazing. But yeah, Nico and I became friends and we became pen pals. And I was talking more in the band. And for a bit, I was in their D&D group. And just like Danny was also in the D&D group. And yeah, and then just from there on, I just kind of started working together with everybody. And then when I finally went to Florida, I went to Fest and I got to meet the band for real and like spend time together, and we roomed together for the trip. And I rode in their van and everything. And finally I got to talk to them and I was like, hey, do y'all remember the potato thing? And they're like, no, not really, what happened? And then I told the story and Tyler was like, Nico, did you not give everybody else the potatoes? And Nico's like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I did. I shared. And they were like, no, we didn't actually get this. So I think next fest I go to, then I should just buy the members of Guilt their own potatoes.
Their own personal potatoes.
I love that. There should be Guilt potato merch. Like I would buy.
They sent me their
Guilt
Lucky
branded
Rock
potato.
They sent me the Guilt Lucky Rock.
See, I was thinking we could cut the guilt logo into potatoes.
It's a little
Oh my
rock with a
God.
guilt pin glued on that they found on a mountain or something. But
Yes, I love that. Like
I don't
that,
know,
but
just-
a potato.
what other kind of world could you just like get a foothold in and get work in by just being an absolute clown and following through on your dumbest jokes?
No, literally, that's so much of what I do. Like at one point, I was mailing my friend a copy of Witcher 3 that I somehow ended up stealing for the Switch. And I didn't have a case for it because it was stolen. So I was like, okay, how do I mail this? So I took a cassette case, I filled it with foam and just made a cute little cover with like a J card and all, and just mailed that to them.
Honestly, bringing back snail mail in like the most creative ways is just my favorite. My favorite. I love it.
I also have like a big little folder of like just random things I've taken. I know this is not going to come across in the podcast, obviously, but I have a set list and a flyer from the last show I played because it was like tiny bands, but I just went around asking them for set lists because I really wanted something to remember the moment by. And then I also have like,
I keep a scrapbook. I keep a DIY scrapbook.
Love it.
I can actually show my folder here. It's this little thing where I have like a piece of a broken cable that I broke during a show once, piece of a broken string that I also broke during a show once, and just like a bunch of random cards. I think I have all of the guild cards in there too that like came with the Ignore What's Missing release.
That makes me feel so much better about myself. Sometimes people are like, why do you have this box of garbage? And I'm like, it's not garbage.
It's sentimental.
I've put it all very neatly and pretty in a scrapbook, and then I'm doing as a zine that's on the Knife Punch site, but like it's literally like suburban mom scrapbook, but my kids are hardcore bands.
No,
Oh
I
my God.
definitely
Can we
recommend
get that
you
on
check
a
out
shirt?
the zines because the zines I did are amazing. Like I'm definitely
I'm
getting
saving
one.
I'm saving one for you.
It's a terrible part, but
Perfect.
We both have our like attention span brain where we're like, oh, we're closing out with a story, and then we're both just like, let's ramble forever.
oh yeah, I was gonna ask if there's time for a story because there's time for another story because I like have the perfect story of how
Please
kind of
share.
I got into the not
You can
necessarily
cut as
into-
much of my nonsense as you want. I'm not.
Oh yeah, same goes for me. Like I'm terrible at like getting solid ideas out. But this story takes place right around quarantine time where I think like February, March, we're still having shows. We had a lot of shows, and like the week everything happened, that we had 5 shows planned in my house. But one of the bands that I think really a solo act at the time that played the most shows there was Precious Little Life. I was just thinking about the way that our friendship sort of progressed from Kevy, the vocalist, guitarist, being at our house and us needing to get rid of the last bit of orange juice and offering it to them because we wanted to make a jeeve out of the bottle. And we were like, we have to pawn this orange juice off to someone quick. And then Kevy got it. We eventually got to talking. We became good friends. And then they had this little band camp for unreleased stuff that they put out. So I want to say this would have been March or April, like just into quarantine, that they came out with an EP, or they didn't release it yet, but they put it on their little temporary band camp, their little secret band camp. And they said they got so many listens that they just had to take it down because they were like, there's no way the release is getting this many listens. Like, I can't let this happen. And at this point, I was going on Bandcamp daily to listen to this specific EP, and I was so disappointed to see it wasn't on there. So I just straight out texted them. I was like, yo, can you please just send me this? I need to listen to it. And I forgot where I was going with this story, but oh yeah, so
Heavy rules.
that's kind of what really prompted the realization in me that like wow, if I just appreciate these people and like tell them about it, I can get these releases, I can get these all to me, and I can be selfish about them.
Yeah, I love that I can see like such a connection between like that story and just so much of what you've shared, you know, with us throughout this episode. But I mean, thank you to both of you for your stories, for your absolute insights, for just like the care and passion like you bring to your work that comes out so clearly all throughout this conversation. And just thank you for being here with me.
If anyone listening wants to be my new best friend, my Twitter is Plot Chickens.
Yes, reach out.
Yeah, like I don't actually run the Knife Punch social, so if you do want to connect with us, Danny runs most of that, but I exist on Discord as Crime Bird and on Twitter as Plot Chickens. And if you want to work together and make art together, I'm totally into it.
Yeah, I also exist on Discord as just my name, and then I forget my Twitter handle, but if you just go on Knife Punch,
it has some letters. It starts with an H.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I have like a few different handles, so I don't remember which version of it is, but I think it's HMBLTH.
Amazing.
Sounds about right. But
well,
yeah,
I hope you caught those so that you can reach out and hang out with and make art with two of the coolest people that we know.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Too Queer for a Career. We'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible, including Truss of Truss Products for the theme music and Hannah Shafi of FrizzKid Art for the cover design. A special thank you to this episode's guests, Bird and Maciej of Knife Punch Records, who can be found on socials with @KnifePunchRecs on Twitter or Knife Punch Records on Instagram. Interested in more music and interviews? Check out our sibling series Tunes Tuesday on the Other Team's YouTube channel to hear about music and matters from queer artists you love.